Hello everyone, thank you for coming to my talk on building full-stack applications with HTMX and Quarkus Qute. I'm Arturo Parra. I help organize the Charlotte Java user group back in the US. I also work as a software engineer for Duke Energy, which is a company that provides power to the east side of the US. I work with AWS Lambdas, Python, Angular, although most of my career has been spent in the Java ecosystem. Now, because I work with the back end and the front end, can I say I'm a full-stack software engineer? I don't know. I'm not so sure about that, and I don't think so. That's why I put it in question marks. So the agenda for this talk, we're going to go over the typical single-page application flow. What is HTMX? What is a hypermedia-driven application and what is its flow? What is Quarkus Qute at a high level? We're going to be doing a live demo in this talk, and then at the end we will go over when and when not to use HTMX. Okay, so the typical single-page application, as we know it right now, there's always a client and a server, and I divide these two into step 1 and then steps 2 through n. So in the step 1, normally a client makes an HTTP GET request to a server, and then the server returns a bundle which contains HTML, CSS, JavaScript, sometimes images or some other resources. But this bundle typically is large. So the steps 2 through n, the client continues communicating with the server, and it also makes HTTP requests with all of the verbs sometimes, get, post, delete, etc. And that's done using either fetch or a library like Axios. Now the server returns JSON with the data requested by the client. We all are familiar probably with this approach. This is state of the art. But there are some trade-offs with this approach. And that is, it is a thick client-like because the bundle that the server sends on the first call is typically large. So that results in inefficiencies. So time to first load or time to first interaction to the user is not efficient. The other problem with this is that it's not real HTMX. HTMX is a mouthful. It just means hypermedia as the engine of application state. And that's one of the REST architecture constraints. Now, JSON is not a natural hypermedia. And many people, almost all of developers right now call this type of approach REST applications. The contention here is that because JSON is not a natural hypermedia, this is not REST. Applications built in this manner are not RESTful. And then the other trade-off is that there's some JavaScript fatigue because UI frameworks, React, Angular, are large, right? And they've grown so much that learning them, the learning curve to master them is like huge. And I don't know you guys, but in my case, whenever I have to touch the UI, I need to relearn the UI framework because I spent most of my time in the back end, and when I need to make a little change in the UI, I need to relearn a lot of things because sometimes we work with React, sometimes with Angular. It could be different frameworks. All right, so what is HTMX? HTMX is a JavaScript library, but it allows you in many situations to write beautiful UIs, SPA-like, without having to write even a single line of JavaScript code. It was created by Carson Gross back in 2013, so it's been around for some time, although back then it was called Intercooler.js. Later versions renamed it to HTMX, which I think is a better name. The only thing they did was they removed the jQuery dependency. Now it's dependency-free. It's standalone. and it communicates with hypermedia, hence HTML. So it uses HTML tag attributes. You see them there. We will see them in the demo. HXGet and so on to communicate with the server instead of using JavaScript. And this is what the author of the library considers should have been the evolution of HTML. That's why they named it HTMX, which is like HTML extended. Now, an application built with HTMX can be considered a hypermedia-driven application. And the flow is very similar to the other one with two key differences. In the step one, we can see that instead of returning a bundle, a huge bundle, the server returns HTML directly and just the HTMX library, which is really tiny, 14 kilobytes when minified. And then from steps 2 through N, again, client and server keep on communicating, but with HTML, not with JSON, which is hypermedia. Now, the benefits of this approach is that it is a thin client. As you can see, it's not a huge bundle. It is real HADIOS, hypermedia driven, and then removes JavaScript fatigue, because like I mentioned, in many scenarios, you don't have to write a single line of JavaScript code. The trade-offs is not for everything, right? So if you have an application that requires a lot of UI-only interactions, this is not the use case for HTMX. All right, so what's Quarkus Qute? Since HTMX required the server to send it HTML instead of JSON, it is a good idea to use a templating engine in the backend to produce that HTML instead of hard coding it. So this is Quarkus templating engine proposal. It's got good ergonomics. It's got safe templates, type-safe templates. So at build time, Quarkus will tell you whether your templates exist or not before you deploy your application. And then there are other benefits to this Qute templating engine, like it's reactive capable, not necessary, but it's there. And it's got fragments, which are snippets of code or HTML that can be embedded in larger HTML templates that can be manipulated independently. All right, so let's do the demo. So right here, I do have a normal normal Jakarta EE application skeleton. The source only contains an index file with a my app h1, kind of a hello world, and then also I have a lib directory with the HTMX and the simple CSS libraries in there, which I'm including, as you can see here, in the index HTML. So if we were to run, this application, we would just see that that title, my app. And then if we click on home, it stays there because it's home. Okay, so let's go back here. Let's say we wanted to add a package or a module to manage contacts. So for that, we would just add a Java resource under the contacts package. Let's call it contacts resource. index.java. Then let's go there. It's in package contacts. And then let's create a path, not patch, path. And then in here, let's do a public class. Yep. Let's import path. And then in here, let's create a get endpoint with which will return a response. And then let's do get contacts. And for now, we will just return a response OK, contacts. And then let's build the response. Now in path, let's name it contacts as well. Now if we were to go to our application, we see that we need another menu option to go to contacts. So in index, let's duplicate this link we have up here. And then instead of going to home, we will go to the contacts endpoint. And let's name it contacts. So nothing fancy yet. So let's refresh this. And now we have the contacts. Let's click on contacts. And we see that, well, yeah, it goes to the contacts endpoint, but it removes all of my CSS, right? That's not what we want. And this is normal behavior because the browser simply renders whatever the server sent back to it. So here's where we are going to introduce HTMX to do it more dynamically and only substitute the content of our page instead of the whole HTML. So let's go back in there. And then here, what we're going to do, instead of using the href, we are going to use our first HTMX attribute, hxget. And yeah, it'll go to contacts. And there's another attribute from HTMX that's called hxtarget. And with that, we tell HTMX where to put the response that we got from the server. In this case, let's say we want to put it in the main content section. And we can use CSS selectors for that. So if I named it content here, I need to come in here and give it an ID to the main section of content, whatever I named it up there. So when we do that and come back here, now we are only replacing that little piece. Even though the server only returned that string, we are telling it, yeah, but that only put it inside that target. And the default behavior for hxtarget, when you put a CSS selector, it goes and grabs that HTML element based on the selector, and the inner HTML is what gets substituted. That's the default behavior, but it can be changed, as we will see later. Now, of course, we don't want to hardcode our content that gets returned from the server. Here's where we need a templating engine, right? And for that, we're going to use Quarkus Qute. And Quarkus Qute, by convention, requires us to create a directory under resources called templates. And to take advantage of the type safety for templates, it requires us to create another directory with the same name of the resource that will be using those templates. This is to keep things organized and to leverage type safety. So in this case, our resource is contacts resource. And we are going to put our template in there, call it contacts HTML. Now let's put in here an H1 with the word contacts, which is the title of our section. And when we go to our actual resource, we don't want to return the string contacts, we want to return the template. And for that, we will use the annotation checked template from Quarkus Qute, and then we create a class in there. We can name it whatever we want. So let's call it templates. And then I'm going to create a static native method, which means Quarkus will provide an implementation of that method at compile time. We don't have to implement it ourselves. So we do static native, and then what it returns is a template instance, also from Quarkus Qute. And then let's name it contacts. Now, this is by convention because that's how Quarkus knows what's the name of our template. And we named it, as you can see here, we named it contacts HTML and inside templates and in here. We named it contacts HTML, so that's how Quarkus will identify, oh, okay, so there has to be a contacts template. All right. So down here in our endpoint, instead of returning the string directly, we will create a contact template variable, and then let's do templates contacts. And instead of returning that, we will return the actual template. Now let's go and refresh here. Let's go to contacts, and we see that we got that little template inside the main content. Okay, so let's go back here to home. And then, so obviously we want to show a list of contacts, right? And because right now we don't have any contacts, let's suppose we grab some contacts from a database or another REST endpoint, whatever, and then we will show that by default. So let's create a record to simulate that's our database data, and let's name it contact with just a string name and a string email. And that's all it's going to have. And then let's add a hash map that will be string contact to be able to add and remove from our list. And then let's call it contacts equals new hash map. And then let's say in our constructor, we create a brand new contact. New contact. And we're going to give it my name and my email. Okay, so we have a new contact. All it's left is let's add that contact to our contacts list or hash map. And the key will be the contact email and the value will be the contact itself. Okay, so now we have a hash map with a list of contacts. We just have one contact in the hash map. So we need to pass that list to our template so that it can render the list of contacts. So for that, we're going to go over to our contacts template, and let's create a table real quick. And that table will have a t-head, and then the t-head will have two table headers, one for name, oops, and one for email. And then in our t-body, we will have a row, right? But we want our template to loop through our contacts and put a row, an HTML row for each contact. So for that, Qute provides expression language, which is very easy to understand. You just use curly braces, and then for contact in contacts, that means it is expecting a contacts list or collection. And then it'll loop through that. And for each contact, we want to put a TR. Inside the TR, we will have a table data cell. And inside there, we can also use expression language and then contact dot name. Let's copy that. And then instead of name, let's do email. And we need to close our block with /4. So this is telling us, okay, I'm expecting a collection of contacts. I will loop through them, and I will create a TR element for each one of those contacts and extract the information from every contact. Now, once we have that, obviously we need to pass the list. And for that, because we already have it, sorry, not here. Down here, what we're going to do is first of all, in our template definition, we need to tell it we are going to pass you a collection of contacts. And then we will name it contacts. Everything is convention, right? If we have an argument called contacts, then our template expects a list, a collection with that same name. So once we define it there, all we have to do is pass it here. So let's use our hash map for that. So contacts that values yeah. And that'll pass just the list of contacts. Okay, so with that, if we go back to our application and then hit contacts, we see that we now have a table. It looped through it, but it only had one element in there. Obviously, this is not complete. What if we want to add new contacts to our list? So for that, we're going to have to add another endpoint. In this case, it's going to be a post endpoint. And then it'll be public and response add contact. And then in here, because we're not dealing with JSON, as I was mentioning in the beginning, we are going to receive form params because this is a normal form submission, right? So we need to capture every element from our form using JAX-RS as normal. So name, That's how I named, that's why we're gonna name our elements in the form. And then this will be of type string, name, and then we will have another form param, email, also of type string, and we will put it in a variable named email. Inside here, all that's left is we need to create a contact object based on that information. So let's do var contact equals new contact, yes, with name and email, which is what we received. Now, of course, the good practice is you need to add validation so that to avoid SQL injection and all that kind of stuff. And then after that, what we do is we add it to our list or our hash map. So contacts put, and then we do contact email, and then we do contact. And then we respond, right? Now, let's take a look at our list. When I add a contact, what do I want the server to return to me? I don't want the server to return the whole list because I just need to update a little piece of my table, right? And just put it at the end. So to that, for accomplishing that, Quarkus Qute comes with these fragments, which are little snippets of HTML in our templates. So let's go to our contacts template, and then in here, what we want to be able to return just this little piece right here, and treat it as a single unit, a row with one contact. So for that, we declare a fragment, and we give it an ID, contact in singular, right? And then we close our fragment. That's gonna be our fragment that can be manipulated independently. Now for that to work, we need to declare another template in our check templates. So let's copy that, but instead of contacts, we will name that contacts $contact. That means inside the contacts template, there will be a fragment with an ID contact. And of course, we won't pass a whole collection of contacts, just one contact. So let's change what's inside to contact. And down below in our post, what we do here is create our contact template instance, which will come from templates, and then contacts contact, and we pass the contact we just created. And what we do last is return it. Return, response, and we're going to do we can do response status. What's that? Oh yeah, and actually I had an error there. Return response status, and then we'll do response status created, and then after that let's do entity and pass in the contact template, build our response, and with that we're just returning that little snippet, right? Now in our HTML, obviously we need a form to be able to invoke that post endpoint. So let's create that form with a label for name and then an input so they can type text. And then we will name it name. Oops. And then instead of, we don't need value, so we will have an ID which will be also name. And let's copy that and do the same for email. Obviously, we need a button of type submit because we will submit the whole form. And then we'll say add. So we have our form. Now, we won't use our typical action attribute. We will use HTMX for that. And we will tell it HTMX or AJAX post in this case. Also, it's going to go to contacts. And in here, our target element will be the body of our table to include it there. So in this case, it's, let's call it contacts as well. It's a CSS selector. So if I name it contacts, let's go to our T-body, give it an ID of contacts. Now, remember the AJAX target's default is to replace the inner HTML of the element we're targeting. This is not the behavior we want in this situation because that would replace the whole table with, or will remove all of the rows and just show the row that just got added. We don't want that. We want to add the row at the end of the existing table. And for that, we will change the default behavior by using the AJAX swap attribute that changes the swap strategy. And we have multiple options. What we want to do is add it, whatever the server returns, we want to add it before the end of the table. So when the server returns that one row in HTML, it'll place, HTMX will place it at the end of our existing table. Okay, so let's go to our application. Let's go to contacts. We have now a form. Let's add Alan Turing, let's say, Alan Turing. And let's click on add, and it got added at the end. Let's add one more. Let's say Ada Lovelace. And that's it. Now we are manipulating snippets of HTML. Instead of communicating with JSON, we are communicating with HTML, but not like the old way, like the old days, right, in which we returned a whole bunch of HTML completely. In this case, we're just returning snippets of HTMLs just for what's needed. Similar to JSON, but in this case, we're using hypermedia. Okay, so last, let's say we want to remove some contacts from our list. So for that, we would just implement our delete endpoint. Delete contact. And then in this case, we will receive a path parameter, email, because that's how we will identify which one is going to be removed. Type string, email. And then, because it's a path pattern, we need to update our path and give it the path pattern name, in this case, email. Now, in this case, what we do is delete it from our hash map. So contacts, remove using the key, email, and then we return, a response, okay, with no content. So we build a response like that. Now in the UI, obviously we need a button that will allow the user to remove users, or contacts rather. So let's do another th, which will be empty. And we will add a td right here. This is the last part. And let's add a button in there of type, in this case, button with an X, so that the user knows this is to remove. This one will go as an AJAX delete, again to contacts, but in this case we will pass in the contact email as a path parameter. And the swap strategy, or the target rather, the AJAX target of our HTML has to be different than the traditional ones, because what we want to do is we want to target the TR that contains the same contact. So for that, we do closest TR, which is the one that contains it, and it will always be that case. And then what we also want to do is change the strategy, the replacing strategy, and what we want to do is whatever the server returns, which in this case will be nothing, that nothing will replace the whole TR, effectively removing it from the list in the UI. So let's go to our application, refresh it, go to contacts. Let's say we add Alan Turing again. And now we see the buttons to remove. We click on one, and it got removed. So that concludes our demo. Let's just talk about real quick when to use HTMX, when not to use it. So summarized, it's best when you're doing enterprise applications or CRUD applications. And I don't mean CRUD in a demeaning way. We can have very complex applications that are CRUD, right? We can have even AI or crypto or whatever you have in the back end, or many other enterprise complex business logic, and it is still a CRUD application. And you can achieve single page application like behaviors using HTMX, and as you can see, we didn't use any JavaScript for that. So it effectively, HTMX extends the HTML behavior. When not to use it, for example, if you're building an online game that requires a lot of interactions that only happen in the UI, you don't require a lot of communication with the backend because you need to track mouse movement and that kind of thing. So that's when you probably don't want to use HTMX. You can use something else. Like Figma, Adobe XD, things that need a lot of UI-only interactions. That's when you don't use HTMX and resort on something else. All right, so any questions? I will be uploading the code for this to my GitHub. So if you send me a message on my Twitter account, I will just send it to you after we finish here. So any questions?
Yes, I do. A question. What if I want to hide the delete button based on some logic? Would still be one of the cases where you say, oh, maybe HTMX is not the right way to go because it says too much UI stuff. I mean, one of the penalty was UI. Can you go back to the slide, please? Heavy UI only behaviors.
Yeah, heavy UI only behaviors. No, this only means if you require the user to interact with the UI only. For that scenario that you mentioned, what I would do is, that's actually business logic, and I would handle it in the backend. Even if it's still UI, it's in the backend, where in the templating engine, I would have my logic there. Okay, when you render this HTML, don't render at all, right? And you have better security on the backend. So what you send back to the UI doesn't even contain the button. So even if somebody wanted to do something with it with JavaScript in the UI, they couldn't. It does not exist, right? So yeah.
Assume the table would be sorted by email, and then you would add. You cannot do the trick and edit at the end. Can you achieve that it's still sorted and you edit in the right place, or how would you do such a thing?
For that, actually, you can if you want to resort every time your list when you add a user, what you can do is, as you render your template in the backend, you can implement some logic for sorting it, and instead of just returning that one single user, you return the whole list resorted.
So I have to return the whole list and cannot just return the new edit
element. Right. So HTMX is not against JavaScript. You can still implement some snippets of JavaScript on your UI to do UI-only behaviors, right? So you can combine the two, and actually HTMX comes with a great event handling mechanism to communicate with other frameworks. So it can coexist with React, let's say. All right. Any more questions? Well, then thank you so much for attending my talk, and I hope you got some value from it. Send me a message on Twitter if you want the GitHub repository. All right, thank you.